What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here to take a look at Stokastic's MLB DFS Lineup Generator. While you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. And if you have not yet signed up for the Lineup Generator, you can still get it for 50% off your first week using the link that I just put into Twitter. It'll be on this tweet, or if you're on YouTube, it's going to be in the description of this video. It's going to be just $4.48 for your first week. $8.95 after that. Fantastic deal, regardless, even if you don't get over 50% off. Great deal for a tool that's only going to give you plus EV lineups. Every single lineup that you get in Lineup Generator has been run through simulations. Every negative EV lineup has been taken out. All of these lineups that you're going to see here are lineups that have been found to be long-term profitable in the Stokastic sims. So check it out if you have not already. It is a fantastic tool. I'm going to be looking at lineups that we get right now for both DraftKings and FanDuel. Of course, I'm recording this at 2:12 Central Time. The slate's going to lock at 6:05 Central Time. So obviously, I'm going to run new sets before I actually enter lineups tonight. You don't want to be making your lineups at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Lineups can change. A lot changes throughout the day. So you don't want to be using lineups that you get at 2 o'clock. But check again closer to lock. You run the lineup generator closer to lock because we'll have updated ownership projections, updated lineups, etc., etc. But let's see what we're getting at this time of the day. I'm going to start in DraftKings. I'm going to do all stack types, and I'm going to do all lineup types. So it's going to be a mixture of contrarian, balance, and chalky lineups. I like to spread out my exposure a little bit. I think this is the easiest way to do so. So I'm going to start using all lineups, not going to lock in any pitchers. All right, so the first lineup that I see here is a 5-man Seattle stack with 5-2 Seattle and Milwaukee with Ronald Acuna as a one-off. We've got Luis Castillo for Seattle as well. Some nice added correlation there with the pitcher with his bats. Obviously, if the bats do well, Luis Castillo more likely to get the win. And then we've got Dylan Cease as the second pitcher here. Let's start at taking a look at where Dylan Cease and Luis Castillo, how they look in the top pitchers tool. All right, Luis Castillo is number 2 on the board in terms of top 2 pitcher odds. 29% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Actually, some positive leverage there. 26% projected ownership. Great matchup with Washington, so don't mind that one bit. And then Dylan Cease, 5th on the board in terms of top 2 pitcher odds. 20% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Slight negative leverage, but 7,700. Nice price for Dylan Cease. And still top 5 overall in top 2 pitcher odds. Then we had the Seattle 5-man stack. Seattle number 2 on the board in terms of top stack odds with an 11% chance of being the top stack at 14% ownership. So a little bit of negative leverage on Seattle, but we'll take a look at the individual bats, see if we found some lower owned bats within the stack. And then Milwaukee, also we got a 2-man Milwaukee stack with a 9% chance of being the top stack on the board at 6% ownership. So Milwaukee looking pretty good today against Justin Verlander. Let's take a look at the individual bats here. So yeah, we did get Luis Urias at 6% projected ownership, not very high. Mike Ford at 7%, William Contreras at 8%. So we do have, despite using a chalkier Seattle stack, we got some lower owned bats in there with Luis Urias from the Brewers, Mike Ford, one of the lower owned bats in the Seattle stack, and then of course Contreras also from the Brewers. So we mixed in, that's the beautiful thing about the lineup generator. It's going to balance your lineup for you. Even though we used the chalkier stack, we didn't just play chalk across the board. We mixed in some lower owned bats within the stack and then also as the secondary parts of the stack. So it looks like a good lineup overall. I'm going to save that one. All right, second lineup we see is another 5-man Seattle stack. Now we have Reed Detmers and Andrew Heaney as the pitchers. We have, it's just 3 one-offs. So it's a 5-0 stack with Seattle. Royce Lewis bringing down the ownership at 4% projected ownership. Marcus Semien at 10%. Mike Ford once again at 7%. Jared Kelenic at 10%. So some, somewhat lower owned bats mixed in despite using the chalky stack. Reed Detmers and Andrew Heaney. How did they look here? So we've got Reed Detmers number 3 and Andrew Heaney number 4 overall in terms of top 2 pitcher odds. Detmers at 21% chance, Andrew Heaney at 20%. Both a little bit of negative leverage, but also not crazy high ownership there. Looks like a good lineup overall. A little bit higher ownership in total on this lineup than the previous one, but still not very high for a fairly, it's not a very huge slate here. What is this? 6 games, I think, on the slate. So really not getting terribly high ownership for a game for a slate with 6 games on it. All right, I'm just going to go through and save 20 lineups, take a look at what exposures I get overall after running through 20. And you can see here as I go through, this is jumping all over the place because I did a mixture of contrarian, balanced, and chalky lineups. You're going to get the ownership jumping all over in these lineups. So I'm going to get some natural spread on the types of lineups I'm getting. All right, so after running through 20 lineups, I have 55% Julio Rodriguez on a 6-game slate. It's a little bit high. Like if I were creating my lineups a different way, I probably would not try to get to 55% Julio Rodriguez, but really not the end of the world. Just doing 20 lineups on a 6-game slate, I'm willing to be a little bit more condensed in my exposures, so I might be okay with that. 55% Reed Detmers, 50% Spencer Strider. Overall, not getting crazy high exposure to anybody for a 6-game slate. If I were to do anything, maybe I'd go back and get rid of some of my Julio Rodriguez, and I would just do that I'm not swapping him out of my lineups. I'm just discarding some of the Julio Rodriguez lineups and going back and finding full lineups without him. That is my preferred method because I know that these lineups are balanced for me, so I don't want to go back and mess with them by swapping out individual bats. I'd rather just go to full different lineups. So that would be my approach. Is probably I'd either just keep the 20 because this actually is fairly spread out as is, or I might go back and discard some of these Mariner stacks. Maybe do a couple more lineups that are not Mariner stacks to mix in there. Would be my approach on DraftKings tonight. All right, I'm going to take a look at FanDuel as well. I'm again going to do all stack types, all lineup types. Not going to lock in any pitchers. All right, so we get Luis Castillo as the pitcher in this one. 4-man Met stack with a 2-2 Texas and Detroit stack. Let's see where Luis Castillo, how he looks on FanDuel. All right, so on FanDuel, Luis Castillo has the second best top pitcher odds at 13% chance of being a top pitcher, 16% projected ownership. Great matchup once again with Washington. So Luis Castillo looks good. And then we have the 4-man Mets, 2-man Texas, 2-man Detroit. All right, so on FanDuel, the Mets are 4th overall in top stack odds with a 10% chance of being the top stack. Slight negative leverage there on the Mets, but just have to find pieces to balance them out. And then we have Texas and Detroit. Texas with a 14% chance of being the top stack at 11% ownership. Detroit at 7% chance of being the top stack at 6% ownership. So some nice, a little bit of leverage here. And then if we look at the individual bats, we got Vierling at just 4% ownership, bringing down the exposure a little bit. Francisco Alvarez at 5%. So a lot of, somewhat chalky bats here, closer to 20% in Semien and Josh Jung. Brandon Nimmo up at 21%, Starling Marte 19%. So a lot of fairly high owned bats here, but then those are offset by Matt Vierling, Francisco Alvarez, and Luis Castillo. 16% is not too crazy high. A little bit of a unique construction with the 4-2-2. Looks like a nice lineup. All right, I'm going to save that one. Look at one more here. So now we've got Reed Detmers at 11% ownership, 4-man Texas stack. And then we've got it's a 4-3 Texas and Milwaukee stack with Ronald Acuna as a one-off. Owen Miller at 2% ownership, really bringing down the ownership in this one. William Contreras again at 4%. Mitch Garver at 7%. So some lower owned bats really bringing down the exposure a little bit here. And then Reed Detmers at 11%. Let's see in the top pitchers tool. We've got Reed Detmers 3rd in terms of top pitcher odds, 10% chance of being the top pitcher on the slate at 11% ownership. So again, looks like a nice lineup here. 4-3. So the first two lineups we are 4-3 and 4-2-2. Kind of interesting. Neither is a 4-4 stack. This one, of course, very far on the contrarian side. Again, I'm just going to go through and save these 20 lineups, and you can see how this meter jumps all over the board in terms of ownership. It's going to stay, close to the optimal in terms of projection. Like I'm guessing we're not going to see any lineups that don't project fairly close, like top 10%, 20% maybe in terms of projection. But then the ownership is going to jump all over the place with the lineup settings that I chose. All right, so once again, pretty spread out. Spencer Strider, 60% exposure to Strider. Let's see where I'm sure he's top in terms of top pitcher odds. Yeah, 16% chance of being the top pitcher at 41% or so. We do have negative leverage on Spencer Strider, but again, really more willing to eat the chalk on pitchers because you don't necessarily need the top pitcher on the board. Like obviously, Spencer Strider also the most expensive pitcher on the board, so it hurts if Luis Castillo outscores him. But if Spencer Strider puts up 45, FanDuel points, and Luis Castillo puts up 49 or whatever it would be. He's not going to be the top pitcher, but it also doesn't hurt you that much because you're not generally going to land on the optimal in MLB DFS anyway. So if he's close enough to being the top pitcher, probably not the end of the world. And it's kind of hard to predict day to day who is going to be the top pitcher. So I'm generally okay with eating a little bit more chalk at pitcher here. I might try to get a little bit less, but honestly, it's Spencer Strider. With Spencer Strider, I might just eat that chalk. Once again, getting in 55% Julio Rodriguez, 55% Marcus Semien as well, 50% Teoscar Hernandez. Again, I might go back and try to flatten out that exposure a little bit to some of these players. Maybe I want a little bit less Julio Rodriguez and a little bit less Marcus Semien or Spencer Strider, but I'd also be, it's flat enough kind of as is. So I might be okay with just having this set of 20 lineups. It's fairly risky having 60% of 55 plus percent of a few guys here, but in 20 lineups I'm more willing to take on a little bit more of that risk. If I were doing a 150 set, I would probably want to flatten out my exposure a little bit more, but for 20 lineups I think I'd be okay having a little bit more concentrated ownership on just a few of these players. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't done so, please do hit that like button, and good luck tonight.